All right, let's dive into something a little different today, huh? We're tackling Strategy is Not Planning by Tyler Dorsey. And I know you requested this one because you really wanted to understand how to make smarter decisions, right?
Yeah.
Using data and all that.
Yeah, and what really struck me about Dorsey is that he's not just, some consultant who's read about this stuff. The guy spent like a decade in the thick of it, B2C marketing, and it really shows. You can tell he's been in the trenches.
Totally. So, okay, right off the bat, Dorsey kind of throws the curveball. Strategy is not planning. And I got to admit, I was like, wait, what? I always thought those were basically the same thing. But Dorsey argues they're actually fundamentally different.
Yeah, he totally goes there. It's more like um, planning is
Yeah.
obviously important, right? But it's just one piece of the puzzle. It's about setting goals and then figuring out, those individual steps to get there. But strategy is way more dynamic. Dorsey calls it, and I love this, he calls it a constantly evolving theory about how to win, which means you have to be ready to, adapt and shift gears as things change around you.
So it's less about like predicting the future and more about having a framework for when, the future inevitably throws you a curveball.
100%, yeah. It's like he uses this great analogy of like a business's profit journey, right? Think of it as a line graph tracking profits over time.
Yeah.
And it's never just a straight line to the top, is it? There are going to be dips and plateaus and maybe a sudden surge here or there. You can't predict it.
And you definitely can't plan for every single up and down. So how does Dorsey say we should approach that uncertainty, like strategically?
Well, he breaks business growth down into these 6 distinct stages, and each stage comes with its own set of challenges, its own opportunities. And this is where I love this. This is where his whole hot dog stand analogy comes in.
Okay, yeah, I have to admit, when I saw hot dog stand in a book about business strategy, I was a little skeptical. But honestly,
Yeah.
it's so effective. So break it down for us. What's the deal with the hot dog stand?
So basically, he uses it to illustrate how a business, any business really, can increase profitability at each of these growth stages. So like in stage 1, right, you're just starting out, figuring out your recipe, like where's the best location for my stand, all that basic stuff. But then you get to stage 2. Now you've got some data, you can see what's selling, what's not. And it can be really tempting to just like scale up as fast as possible.
Right. Strike while the iron's hot.
Exactly. But Dorsey's like, hold your horses. He warns against what he calls premature scaling. Basically, getting ahead of yourself, before the data really supports it. He gives this example of, I think it was a vegan recipe platform. They put tons of resources into this massive website redesign because they thought, this is it. This is how we attract paid subscribers.
Did it work?
Not even close. What they should have done was look at the data they already had. Turns out they had this small but super engaged group of users who were already generating like most of their revenue. They should focus on what was working for them instead of, trying to reinvent the wheel.
It's amazing how often we overcomplicate things, right? When the answer's like right there in front of us. Data, especially early on, super key. What else does Dorsey say about these stages, though?
It gets more complex as you move through, for sure. Like one thing he really emphasizes is that clinging to a failing strategy, that can be way riskier than adapting and evolving, even if it means like big changes. There's this one line that really stuck with me, especially for like businesses in that stage 4. The cost of change is less expensive than the loss of opportunity.
Wow, that is powerful. So how do we spot those opportunities then? Those moments where change is needed. It all comes down to your audience, right? Really understanding them. And Dorsey brings back, yeah, you guessed it, the hot dog stand to illustrate this.
Oh, absolutely. But this time, our hot dog guy, he's leveled up, right? He's not just on some random street corner. He's strategically positioned at the Crimson Falcons Stadium.
Okay, so he's in the big leagues now, but how does that change things for him? It's still a hot dog, right?
Exactly. But now he's not just selling to people who like hot dogs. He's selling to different segments within that larger market. And understanding those smaller groups, that's the key to those big profits.
Okay, so paint that picture for me. Let's say I'm at the stadium. I'm craving a hot dog. How does our hot dog hero reel me in using this whole segmentation thing?
Well, he's got to figure out, who are you? Are you a diehard Falcons fan, there for the tradition, the whole experience?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm just there because, hot dogs and sporting events kind of go together.
Right. Or are you with your family looking for a fun, affordable outing? Or maybe you're a tourist just grabbing a quick bite. Each of those groups, they've got different motivations, different things they value,
And in different budgets, probably.
for sure. And you better believe they're willing to pay a premium for a hot dog that speaks to those specific wants and needs.
So it's about more than just yelling, hot dogs! Get your hot dogs here!
Oh, yeah, he's got to tailor that pitch. For the diehards, maybe it's show your Falcon pride with the official dog of champions. For families, maybe it's a combo deal. And for those tourists, highlight something unique, like a local topping or ingredient.
Get your authentic stadium dog here. You won't find this anywhere else.
Exactly. You're not just selling a hot dog anymore. You're selling an experience,
Yeah.
a sense of belonging. And those things, people are willing to shell out a little extra for that.
Makes sense. And this whole idea, it applies to more than just hot dogs, right?
Yeah.
This is where, if I remember correctly, we get to Dorsey's example of the yacht brokerage.
Oh, absolutely. This is where things get really interesting. We're talking high-end luxury market.
So how does Dorsey apply these same principles to selling, million-dollar yachts? Are there even segments within a market like that?
Oh, you better believe it. Dorsey uses this incredibly detailed questionnaire, like really digs into this real-life yacht brokerage. And he uncovers their strengths, their weaknesses, but most importantly, their opportunities for growth. And it's not just about appealing to the super wealthy, which, you might assume is the only target audience here.
So even in the world of luxury yachts, there are hidden segments like untapped potential customers.
Totally. One example Dorsey talks about is this growing interest in eco-friendly yachts. Even in an industry known for, extravagance, there's this shift happening, right,
Yeah.
towards sustainability, eco-consciousness, and the brokerage that recognizes that caters to it, they've got a huge advantage.
It's about anticipating those shifts in values, even in places you might not expect, like who knew yacht buyers cared about the environment?
Right. But it makes sense. And this is where Dorsey talks about the importance of what he calls omnipresence in marketing.
Mhm.
Basically, you have to make sure your message reaches your target audience no matter where they are.
So not just relying on one fancy ad in a yachting magazine, right? You've got to be everywhere your ideal customer might be.
Exactly. Events, social media, partnerships, you name it. It's about being present and relevant across all those touch points. And this is where Dorsey uses a word that might seem a little, well, intense at first. He talks about indoctrination.
Indoctrination.
Okay.
Yeah, that does sound kind of intense, especially when we're talking about like selling someone a yacht.
It's not about brainwashing, I promise. What Dorsey means is that you need to nurture those potential customers, right?
Yeah.
Through targeted content, strategic partnerships. You're creating a community around your brand.
So it's less about selling and more about like building a tribe, a group of people who connect with your brand on the deeper level.
Exactly. It's about shared values, a sense of belonging, and that kind of authentic connection. That's gold in today's world.
I feel like we could talk about this stuff for hours. We've covered so much ground, from the nuts and bolts of strategy versus planning to like the power of data and really understanding your audience.
And those examples, right? I mean, who knew you could learn so much from a hot dog stand and a yacht brokerage?
Right. But the big question I always have after these deep dives is like, okay, how do I actually use this stuff? It's one thing to, wrap your head around these concepts, but how do we actually turn all this information into action? Like what's step one?
And that's where Dorsey's emphasis on observation really comes in. He's all about, taking in information, collecting data, and constantly refining your approach based on what you're learning as you go.
So it's almost like building a strategic muscle. You know what I mean? Like the more you use it, the stronger it gets.
100%. And honestly, I think that's the biggest takeaway from Dorsey's work. It's not about finding that perfect plan because honestly, that doesn't exist, right?
There's always going to be something you didn't anticipate.
Always. It's about being willing to adapt and evolve, to be open to new information and to question your assumptions and to, course correct when you need to.
And that can be kind of uncomfortable sometimes, right?
Mm.
But Dorsey's point is that clinging to a strategy that's not working, that's way riskier than just embracing the unknown.
100%. Like he said, the cost of change is less expensive than the loss of opportunity.
So true. Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into strategy is not planning, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from this?
I'd say it's this. Approach everything with a strategic mindset. Whether you're, starting a business, writing a book, whatever it is, don't get bogged down in the planning phase.
Right. Start by asking yourself those key questions Dorsey talks about, like what are you actually trying to achieve? Who are you trying to reach? And then how can you use data, use your observations to make better, smarter decisions along the way.
Exactly. Those questions, they'll put you on the right track. And remember, you don't have to have all the answers right away. Don't be afraid to experiment, to try things out, to even like make mistakes. That's how you learn and grow.
So well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. How can you apply these principles, especially this idea of understanding your audience and tailoring your message to your own life and your own goals? It's something to think about as you continue on your own journey. Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.